Over the years, look back at around 50 clients, there were three themes that came up. One was SAS, about creating space. The second one is about accountability. And the third one's about support. Those three things, that's why often we're so day-to-day in what we're doing, and it relates to living with intention. We're so in the weeds, we can't really see the perspective. By booking a coaching session, I always say it's similar to booking a holiday. Once you book the holiday at start, think about it, what should I pack? Feel lighter, because you know there's that session next week. There are certain things I need to do by then, which sets up the accountability. She's such a cheerleader for me, and that's where the support piece comes in. I just want people to be happy and to succeed, whatever success means to them, not comparing to other people, which we so often do.
Connection isn't something you network your way into. It's something you practice through attention, courage, and the willingness to be moved by the moment in front of you. My guest on today's show is James Eder, author, entrepreneur, speaker, and work-life coach with more than 20 years of leadership experience. He co-founded Student Beans, part of Pion, a global platform that helps brands build trust with Gen Z through verification, insights, and engagement. His new book, The Collision Code, donates all royalties to charities including the British Heart Foundation, Cardiomyopathy UK, the King's Trust, and Young Enterprise. In our conversation, James shares the health wake-up call that put everything in sharper focus for him and the unexpected gifts that came with it. He explores how serendipity becomes more than luck when you choose intention. James breaks down his code for creating meaningful collisions, permission, confidence, and context, and how vulnerability quietly opens doors that strategy can't. We also talk about living with mortality in view, why gratitude shifts the nervous system fast, and how small moments of courage can reroute an entire life. You may walk away from this episode wanting to say yes to the next small moment that taps you on the shoulder. So without any further ado, on with the show. James, it's so great to have you on the show.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So first of all, let's talk a bit about your new book, The Collision Code. How did that book come about? It must be, I don't know, there must be some sort of amazing story behind it, the synchronicities or serendipities that brought that book into fruition. So what happened there?
Absolutely. You know, I've been watching a number of your interviews and various people talking about the process of writing a book. And I'm going to say it's not for the faint-hearted. And I think some people, you've got an idea and then actually the reality of making it happen. And for me, I guess my book journey really, it started kind of 4 years ago now that I was in hospital. And the doctors, I found out a while before that, 8 years ago, I found out I've got a heart condition. But then 4 years ago, they said that my heart condition had deteriorated and that it might be time to go on the heart transplant list. And the real kind of confrontation of that led me to then making the decision, like, if something happens to me, then I really need to have this book written, because things were happening to me in my life that I experienced and I did that that were very important to me, and around kind of the concept of serendipity and connection, but also the importance of community and living with intention. I think so many times, you know, we spend our lives, days turn into weeks, turn into months, turn into years, and we just find ourselves where we find ourselves. And until either something happens to ourselves or someone we know, maybe something bad happens, do we then make a change that's important to us? And so for me, it was various kind of messages, one around serendipity and connection and demonstrating how we can enable serendipity to happen more and create more. Second theme around isolation and loneliness, like we're so digitally connected, but at the same time, many people feel disconnected, and kind of male suicide as well, people in their 40s, such a high challenges in that space as well. And then really about the entrepreneurial journey that I've been on and kind of the successes, not just entrepreneurially, but projects, ideas, things that I've had. There's kind of, I didn't realize I was doing it, but then when I look back, there was a theme, and that's where the code kind of concept came from. And I thought it was really important that if something happened to me, that this had been kind of documented and shared. So that's kind of the essence and the story behind the collision code and where it started.
And so what transpired with you being on the heart transplant? It must have had some sort of breakthrough so you could be here today talking to us on this podcast. So what happened?
Absolutely. So yeah, I mean, the thing for the audience to know, and partly raising awareness why partly for the book as well, was the heart condition's called hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. So it's the thickening of the heart. It's most famous for marathon runners and footballers can suddenly collapse and die from. And in the UK, 1 in 500 people have it, but a lot of people don't know they have it. And obviously, those statistics will be represented kind of across the world. And so the silver lining is we know that I got it. So 8 years ago, I fainted in a theme park. I hit my head, went to the doctor, and they said, because you hit your head, come in and we'll do a blood pressure test. So they did blood pressure and they said, oh, it's a bit different sitting down and standing. We recommend you go to the hospital to have an ECG, which is a basic heart monitor, heart scan, and some blood tests. And I just remember going to the hospital and I parked my car in a pay and display bay, go in just thinking this is going to be a half an hour trip. And they said to me, if anyone died of a heart attack at a young age in your family? And I'm like, no. And they go, we just need to go and get the consultant. I'm sitting there thinking, my car's on pay and display. Like I need to get on with my day, kind of as we do in our lives that we're so busy and what we think is important. And anyway, they came back and said that you need an ultrasound, which we did. And then they said you need to stay in hospital. And again, the pay and display was like, but my car's, what can I do with my car? And they said, look, how far away do you live? I said, it's about 5 minute drive. They said, go park and then come back immediately and come to A&E and you need to be in hospital. So that was 3 days in hospital 8 years ago, and they diagnosed me with the condition. And then over that summer, I had various tests, and they then referred me to a potential heart transplant assessment. And so they said to me, you don't need one now in my first assessment, but you need to come back in 6 months' time. So it's this kind of very challenging perspective of, and I actually posted something about this on LinkedIn. Imagine you were being given 6 months to live. What would you do? And I've not been given 6 months to live per se, but I have also been told that in 6 months' time, things might have deteriorated. And so it has the silver lining given me this kind of focus of intention and what it is that's important. It's making a lot of things they know easier because I'm like, does that fulfill me? Do I really want to be doing those things? And so when things deteriorated 4 years ago, I'd had an infection that was turning a corner and getting better, and I was on new medication. So I said to the doctors, I don't want to go on the list now. But I mean, it was borderline whether or not I needed it. And they said, it's up to me ultimately, but they will tell me. It's that fine line of telling me and me also mentally being prepared. And there's a certain number of statistics that you need to kind of get your head around. One is the average life expectancy when you have a heart transplant, 11 years. And so the doctors are really playing this fine line of keeping me alive long enough on my current heart before it's needed. And unfortunately, I've had a friend unfortunately pass away that he was on the list and then it was too late. And it's this really fine balance. And so at the time I said, no, I don't want to go on it now. But they reviewed me again every 3 months for the next year. And I've slowly got kind of better and stable. On paper, I'm still a heart transplant candidate. And I'm kind of living in this space of every 6 months now seeing the doctors. I've got a defibrillator inside of me, so I'm bionic, which is quite amazing, which is made by Boston Scientific. And every week by my bed, there's a data that gets sent to the doctors. So if there are any changes or trends or things that they can see, then they'll tell me about that. Um, and fortunately, I have been more and more stable. And so, as I say to the doctors and to people, when I did the book launch, I've got the energy now, and 100% actually the royalties from the book are going to a number of charities, including the Heart Foundation and Cardiomyopathy UK, which is also really important. So we've raised almost £10,000 for various charities already. And I'm saying to people, while I've got the energy, use me. How can I help? What can I do? And that's also given me a lot of kind of purpose and intention, which has been, I feel really, really grateful for.
So how are you handling, like emotionally, being on this fine line between and needing a heart transplant or potentially, not, and like the day to day of I don't know, just peace with it, being grateful for it, maybe even. I don't know. Like I can't imagine.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. And I think there's a process of people talk about, is it the seven stages of grief? When you go through and you find out something, and then there's depression, and then you kind of, and then there's acceptance or denial and acceptance, and various kind of stages. And I think when I first got diagnosed, I was, a bit kind of, I remember I was running a company. So kind of my bit of potted background history. I started a company 20 years ago that was called Student Beans, that was all around student discounts. I left day to day 10 years ago with a view of, running a business and setting it up are two very different things. And I'm much more of like the innovation, the ideas guy, and kind of that free flowing stage. And I love what the business is doing, but I had another idea in me that was called Causa, that was like a location based LinkedIn. And you'll see, I guess, the evolution of that is ultimately the collision code. And the idea was to use technology to enable people to connect. So you would log in with LinkedIn, and then you could see who's nearby, kind of like a dating app, but for business connections. And so you could see who's nearby, and you could see their status. It would be like traveling to New York for work. Does anyone want to go to the theater? Or you've got kind of the social business interaction there. And we got over 3,000 users, and Richard Branson wrote about us, and there was loads of press, and it was this really exciting kind of buzzy time. And then I fainted in the theme park in the middle of this business kind of, it was challenging story and growth and what I was trying to do. And I remember saying to all my investors, don't worry, I'm fine. Like 1 in 500 people have got this, and it's great we know about it, and like I can keep going. And that was the first bit. And I remember winning. There was Eric Ries who founded the Lean Startup kind of book and concept and everything. And I remember pitching at an event and winning. And I won a ticket in San Francisco for the Lean Startup conference. And I just remember saying to my doctors, I've won this and I really want to go. And they're like, if you've got insurance, like we're not going to tell you you can't do something, but make sure you've got good insurance and good luck kind of thing. And I remember the pushback. And I think my doctors said to me, you're very different from all our other patients because I know you're going to carry on like living and doing the things that you want to do. And I think the silver lining is really this balance. And so the journey then, like after then being told about the transplant and the prospect of that, that's when I said to my investors, I can't do this anymore. Like that really weighed on me. And I remember going through therapy and speaking about the challenges of living in this way of can't raise money for a company because what happens if in 3 months' time they tell me, oh, you're going to need a transplant? And I thought people, if I shared it, people wouldn't trust me. There was a lot of like my identity just completely just fell apart. And I remember then thinking, therapist said to me, why don't you, for example, I was going to become a coach. So again, the part of the story I over the years I did coaching 20 years ago as part of my dissertation at university. And someone contacted me saying they'd love a session, just kind of a mentoring session. So we did the session and I was in a shopping center and there was a pay as you value head massage company. And I thought, mentoring and coaching is an interesting thing. I walk down the street thinking everyone knows what's inside my head. But when you start having conversations with people and sharing knowledge and the experience I've had, I realized there was a lot that I could really make a difference and help people. So I kind of got to the place of I'm not in a position to set up my own company because one, the stress and anxiety and building and doing and that pressure, but two, that kind of planning for the future. And so I remember then going back to this person and saying, look, I'm actually going to do this professionally. Would you be interested in doing? And I'll do it as a pay as you value methodology. So you choose what you want to pay me. And then we'll have a recurring session in. So I'm not going to do a 6 month program or a 12 month program, which is very common in the coaching world because I kind of couldn't. So I think it's a really interesting thing. If you're being challenged with something that you're like, well, I can't do that. I can't sell a 6 month package. Well, actually, how can you do it in your way? How can you make it work for you? And what I think is so funny about that engagement was that client, that first client, ended up saying, I'd like to work with you and I'd like to do it weekly. And we ended up we're still in engagement, which is almost, again, 8 years later, and it went from weekly to monthly. And it was over a £20,000 engagement. Now, I would never have sold a £20,000 engagement. I would have never done the proposal. We're going to work together for a number of years. And because it's weekly, it unlocks, or because it's an open-ended opportunity, then we get to explore things that, and I recontract every so often. Is this still serving you? You're still getting the value that you need and you want? What other support? We've reached the end of what you originally signed up for. Is there, what else would you like to explore if you'd like to? All of that kind of from not safeguarding, but from a keeping it compartmentalized to make sure we're not just doing it for the sake of doing it, which is also super powerful. And so by having the restriction or being concerned, one also about sharing with I open part of my discovery call with clients is to say, I've got a heart condition, and the reason why I'm coaching is I can't do my own thing, but I want to help other people on their journeys. And even in that sentence, there's a freedom in that that I think I was so afraid of sharing originally. And so that gives you a bit of a glimpse. How am I dealing with it now? Okay, I think, day to day, I'm stable. And again, 4 years ago when I was bedridden, even my clients, I would get up, have a shower, and do a client session. And so my original premise, and again, if people kind of, I often say when I'm speaking and sharing, if there's one thing that you're going to get from this session, is about thinking in that moment, like, what is it that I can, focus what you can do, not what you can't do. And I remember saying to my clients and being open with them, look, I will be there for you and support you and do what I can. And if I can't, obviously we'll tell you. But they served me during that time. My premise was if I can get up and have one client a day, 5 days a week, then that will be a success for me. And that was my starting point from being an entrepreneur and running businesses, from doing 12 to 18-hour days. It sounds simple, but it was this. My aim was, right, over 3 months to have this revenue, one client per day. And this means that I'll go to bed at night having made a difference and contributed. And within 3 months of setting that intention, I hit my client target. And again, some of them I've still been kind of working with kind of over a number of years. And so there's been a real, even when I was bedridden, there was something and a purpose to get up for. So I had my shower, got up, got dressed, sat on that call, did the Zoom thing, delivered the session, and then went back to bed. And that was a number of weeks that was very challenging. But then also you will use the word grateful and gratitude. I'm so grateful for the doctors, the support, my clients, and it really just reframes like what's a good day. And for me, as a good day is I can breathe, I can be here, I can walk, I can do the things that I want to do. And I guess the decision to go on the transplant list will be if there are too many days in a row that I can't do the things that I want to do, then that's going to be the time that I think the decision will be made for me.
Thank you for sharing. This is like really powerful what you're sharing because most people keep this sort of stuff close to their chest. They see it as a sign of weakness. They don't want to share their successes, the Instagrammable moments, and not the reality of tough stuff. So, do you have a lot of clients currently, or are you like how much at capacity are you? If our listener or viewer wants to work with you,
They're more than welcome to reach out. I'm very also selective about who I work with. And so is there capacity? Yes. But at the same time, it's an important, I do a discovery call, I do a 3 hour discovery call. What's interesting, again, people listening about kind of whether it be kind of coaches and doing a sales call, you kind of often, I used to do, you do this 20 minutes and you set it up and you get to know, but actually by delivering more value and adding a whole hour and doing some real coaching within the session, gives people then I think a lot of value and then leads into kind of opportunities for both of us. So yes, very open, and I'm open on LinkedIn if people, that's my kind of default if people want to connect with me. And it's really interesting, just related to that was kind of two things I want to say. One was about vulnerability, which I'll come back to. But I didn't, so many people talk about coaching needing your niche and who you focus on and how you position yourselves. And for me, what I did was I just, again, started because people came to me and it was all around kind of entrepreneurially. If you've got a business idea and you want to do something, where do you start? But then over the years, I kind of look back at around 50, after I'd had about 50 clients, there were three themes that came up. One was SaaS, it's called SaaS, SAS. So it's about creating space. The second one is about accountability. And the third one's about support. And it was like those three things that, like, if I look back, that's why often we're so day to day in what we're doing. And again, this relates to living with intention, right? We're so in the weeds, as it were, that we can't really see the perspective. And so by booking a coaching session, I always say it's similar to booking a holiday. Is once you book the holiday, it starts. You're already thinking about it. What should I pack? And you kind of feel lighter because you know there's that in. And similarly, I've got a coach that I work with, and it's so interesting that even not in the session, you've like, oh, I've got that session in next week, so there are certain things I need to do by then, which sets up the accountability. And she's such a cheerleader for me, and kind of that's where the support piece comes in. That I just want people to be happy and to succeed, and whatever success means to them, and also looking at defining what is success for you, not comparing to other people, which we so often do.
Yeah. Right.
Um, can I share the thing about vulnerability
Yeah, please,
briefly
please.
as well? Because again, I was really scared about sharing with people when I got first diagnosed. And I remember got invited to speak at the University of Birmingham at a conference, and I just shut down the company and I just had this defibrillator put in, and the stitches were still almost wet. I was kind of wearing kind of the bandages still. And I thought it would be a good focus for me to go to the event because a bit of a distraction and being on stage again. And I remember the host of the event said to me, okay, so you've closed down your business. What are you doing next? And I hadn't planned that answer. And I just kind of came out and said, I've just been diagnosed with this condition, and I just had a defibrillator put in. And you could hear the silence in the room. It was kind of this gasping moment, I think, that was kind of shocking. But it just encapsulated the room. And afterwards, this lovely girl came up to me, a girl called Grace, and said to me, "Thank you for sharing. My brother's actually got a heart condition, and we're twins. And he was born, he had viral meningitis, and then that caused complications with his heart. So it wasn't exactly the same condition, but you should talk to him." So I reached out to him afterwards, and we had a call. And he set up a charity called Save Nine Lives, which is the idea that if you're on the donor list, you can save nine people. And a lot of people don't realize, and again, different countries have different policies around opt in and opt out, but the value of this anyway. So save nine lives. And afterwards, he wrote me a card, a handwritten card, and he said, "Thank you so much for talking and for your support and what you're doing and Save Nine Lives and promoting." And here's a pin badge. And I know it must be overwhelming with everything that you're going through, but if you ever need an ear or you need help, please reach out. And unfortunately, Jim passed away when he was 23,
Hmm.
and he had heart complications further, and he was the person I referred to that was on the list, and then it was too late. And look, I'm sharing this story because when we're going through something, for him to have, I'm going to say, the courage and the bravery and to offer me help despite the challenges also that he was facing. And I feel like he was a real inspiration and a role model. And I feel like as I'm going through my journey as well, it's ultimately, and I include the story about him in the book, and it was that moment about vulnerability, being on stage sharing, that the more I've shared, the more things have opened up, the more opportunities have come to me. And I feel so grateful that if just again one person hears it or one person reads the book, that makes a small change in their lives, that they make a decision that will help them move forward or move on or do what they're here to do, then that makes all the difference. And that's why I feel like so empowered to be more vulnerable and to share more.
That's wonderful. When you're sharing that story and you're saying how Grace came up and spoke to you after, made me think of the difference between serendipity and synchronicity and how that chance occurrence wasn't chance. I don't believe.
Yeah.
Serendipity is more like a happy accident, whereas synchronicity is more like the universe is lining things up for you that, there's a divine orchestration happening, a rigged game, so to speak, in your favor. And, you could have a happy accident, beneficial kind of serendipitous event happen, but I don't know, I just feel like the divine hand behind everything that happens. I'm just curious what your take is on that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the code relates to this because ultimately, like one of the things that says in the book is by speaking on stage and by putting yourself out there and by being vulnerable, you are enabling the code to happen, because you're giving people context to come and talk to you. And if I go in a little bit, the code, so there are kind of the three elements of the code. And it's interesting, I thought I'd share as well the idea behind the word collision. I think for many people, it's quite confronting. It's kind of this hitting or on of a force that, and the negative perception of what collision is.
Hmm.
And in the book, I set it up as when you've got a snooker ball or a billiards table and you've got the ball and the white ball then hits another ball, it changes its direction. And that's the essence of the collision code is we're in our lives doing our own thing and then suddenly we meet someone and then something happens and sometimes we don't know, sometimes it might feel like it's a bad thing, but actually you look back and it's like, oh, had I again in that scenario not shared with this audience about what was going on, it wouldn't have led to the conversation with Grace and her brother Jim. So the in terms of kind of the synchronicity or the essence of it, there's three kind of elements of the code. The first is permission. So often we don't feel like we've got permission to talk in certain environments. And I know some cultures are better at it than others. I know on the London Underground, it's a big like no, no, no eye contact, don't talk to anyone. And perhaps in the US there is a more friendly, open, optimistic. But I see it in New York, I see it in San Francisco, people on their phones, in their worlds, not looking up, not connecting, and it feels this kind of jarring. If someone says hello to you, you kind of look at them and double take sometimes, and you can see that happen. So first is permission, and what I say is it's not about me giving you permission. It's ultimately giving yourself permission. And who do you need that permission from? But I say, if you don't feel like you've got permission, then blame me and say, I heard a podcast and it said that I should speak to someone random each day. So I'm standing, whatever it is, and use, I guess, the podcast or this version of a story as an excuse, as the permission to. And so I'm happy to take that blame. That's fine if that feels like that gives you what you need to move forward. The second one, so the first is permission, the second is confidence. And often we're not ready to do something until we've done it once. And that's where the essence of kind of practice and getting things going, and there are again examples in the book. But the final one is context, and which I mentioned around by speaking, you're giving people context. And again, that synchronicity, I love that word. And you kind of when you're doing things and you're in flow, which I know is a great word associated with synchronicity, you're in the right place at the right time, doing the right things. And it prompts me to think I was in a lunch conversation with Mohammed Yunus, who was the founder of the Grameen Bank. He's won a Nobel Peace Prize. And I remember sitting next to him at lunch going, how do you decide what to do on a daily basis? Like, how is it that I'm having lunch with you? In my mind, it was a whole setup. It was a conference called One Young World, bringing together people from over 100 countries from around the world in South Africa. And I found myself at this luncheon. And again, whether it be, like you talk about synchronicity, you'll see the dots where they join. I was involved in a student organization called ISEC in 1948 after World War II with a view of cultural understanding. So if you're going to go and live and work in another country, you're not going to want to fight each other. And so I believe today, more than ever around the world, that principle still apply. And I then get selected to go to this conference in South Africa. I speak on stage, I get invited to this lunch, and there's lots more intricacies in there. But at this lunch, I'm sitting on this table and I remember in the room, there was the CEO of Unilever in the room, a guy called Paul Pullman. Ariana Huffington was in the room, and there was very, like, some amazing world leaders. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to take a risk and I'm going to sit on the table that I don't recognize anyone on because various people that were at the event weren't in the room yet. So I just thought I'd take this chance. Anyway, I sit down at this table and then I realize I'm on Richard Branson's entourage table with his kind of PR and social media person and this person and some other business people. And I'm like, I'm on the tech, like I'm in the room, but I'm not in the room. And this is like, what's going on? And then a guy recognizes me from ISEC, from this conference when I was a student, like years and years earlier, a guy called Raj, and he was working for something called the B Team, which is about kind of an organization of people that are doing great things in the world, and business leaders and everything. So he came and whispered to the guy next to me. The guy stands up and leaves, and then suddenly Mohammed Yunus is sitting next to me. And so we then have this conversation, and his answer to me is, "How do I decide? I trust I'm doing the right thing." And I think we can get so caught up in the world and what we're doing, and is it right and wrong, and am I doing enough today? And there's a lot of pressure I think that often comes from ourselves. And actually, that word, and kind of at the time, I thought, well, you're a Nobel Prize winner. Of course, you can just say that. And how can I take and embody that? But I really, really like, you look back and maybe it's those things. We put so much pressure on ourselves. I think about exams and at school and moments where things are going wrong, things happen. And then we look back and they're just a drama. It just, you can disconnect from it once its time's passed. But we put so much meaning onto so many things. And actually, if we just took a bit of trust, and I love the phrase reframing, if you're struggling with something, it's like, I get to do this.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot around, oh, I'm stuck. I remember I was stuck in traffic this week and I was driving and it was meant to take 3 hours. It took 4 hours. And I was just driving along thinking, but I get to do this. I get to be here. And that's just, instead of, oh, I'm late and this is going to impact on this or this is and I think so often we just forget what a miracle it is to be here and,
Yeah.
and live and contribute. And yeah.
Yeah. It is all a miracle. It was Albert Einstein who said that either it's, your viewpoint, I'm paraphrasing here, your viewpoint
Sure.
is either everything's a miracle or nothing's a miracle.
Yeah.
For me, I choose everything as a miracle. And actually, I know with my deepest inner being that this is true, that everything is a miracle. And yeah, so I'll share a bit of vulnerability here for myself because when you're talking about happening to sit at just the right table, one thing I do when I go to conferences is I ask God to direct me to the correct table. And so I'll leave it in His hands to, tell me where to go. And the most amazing synchronicities happen, and it's incredible. So, um, yeah, I mean, some people believe in psychic abilities and some people don't. So I'm very careful about what I say and who I share with and so forth. But these intuitive whispers, the still small voice that you think is just your inner talking to yourself, that's not you. Like you're
Yeah.
just an antenna. You're an FM tuner, like a radio picking up
Yeah.
all sorts of different voices. They could be angels. They could be God. They could be the opponent. If you're in a low vibration, you might be getting some really low quality radio station coming in. So it's a good reason to up your vibration.
You know what? It just prompts me to think. Just I guess there are a number of foundational stories kind of related in the book that you can answer in that way. I guess, and I guess what I've done, like many models, is you've looked at something and then you've I guess, configured something to look back and be like, oh, that's it. But it again relates to what you're saying. And one of them was sitting on the underground, and a guy sat next to me with a resume, a CV in his hand. And so I just turned to him and said, "Are you looking for a job?" And he ended up coming to work at my company.
Hmm.
And in that moment, you just think, okay, well, the context, again, thinking about the code, permission. I gave myself permission to say something. I had the confidence because I was like, I'm hiring, this guy, he's got a CV, he must be looking for a job. And so the third one, that context, which really kind of aligns it. And then I was said to a colleague, I needed to speak to this specific company of the specific brand. 10 minutes later, I couldn't hear something over the tannoy. So I turned to the guy standing next to me on the platform and I said, is there a problem? Is the train coming? Because I couldn't hear what it said. And he goes, no, no, train will be here soon. So I said, oh, you're dressed up. Where are you off to? And he said, an award ceremony about points and loyalty. So I said, oh, that's interesting. I run Student Beans. What do you do? He goes, oh, you don't know of us, but we're a company called Acorn and we power these other outdoor adventure companies. And he was exactly the brand, the exact person that I needed to talk to. And it was like 10 minutes later. And again, those words synchronicity and something's directing. But I guess it's looking for these moments. There'd be another person that would hear the tannoy, but just stand there thinking, oh, the train will be here soon. Or not, I didn't use it as an excuse. Again, I share the story that it's almost, I mean, it's written now, it's part of the story, but in that moment when it happens, you're just following it and just allowing it to happen. And the final, I guess, related story that kind of brings this a lot together is My dad was on a train coming down from Newcastle, and the train stopped at Milton Keynes, and it's about an hour from London. And he literally thought, what would James do? So again, if there's one thing you're going to take from this, it's about thinking, okay, these stories and why the importance, as with any story, is about a lesson learned that you can then use to do something in your own life. And so he stood up and thought, what would James do? Does anyone want to share a car back to London? He stood up and shared with everyone. A kind of public announcement to the carriage. And these two women said, sure. So after I think a bit of hesitation, they get in the car, they're driving back. My dad says, where are you going? And they said, we're going to the suburb near Golders Green. I said, whereabouts are you going? And it turns out the house they were going to was the house that my dad used to own. And it's the house that I lived for the first 5 years of my life. And
Mhm.
it was the grandmother, one of the girls' grandmother's houses. And I just always think about that around, how many people on that train, how many carriages, how many, like all those things. And the fact is that 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 serendipity, I guess, had he not said anything, you would never have known that.
Yeah.
But that was what was happening. And that was my vision for the app originally was how can we create millions of meaningful connections for people nearby all around the world every day. And there was this real intention of like use technology to unlock those moments, those chance moments that you're like, if I've got a bit of context, that in another world you would, I guess, open it and be like, does anyone want to share a car? And then that broadcasts it, and then people are facilitating that. And it happens every day. Trains are cancelled, flights are cancelled, people need to do stuff. And again, the book talks a lot about these examples and these stories of bringing those to life. That my vision would be that when people read it, it's not about technology anymore. It's actually about putting the technology down and having the confidence, the context, and the permission to go and create these moments
Mhm.
that is serendipitous, synchronous, and all of these things.
Have you had any kind of visions or like paranormal type experiences that are so far beyond just like a chance, seemingly chance coincidence, but something that's like, I can't, you couldn't make this up. Like, I can't believe I just experienced that.
That again, the one with my dad and the fact that it was the home, like that was just, yeah, yeah. When I share it, the thing is, I say if you were going to write a fiction book about what I'm talking about, you would change some of the facts because you would think they're not real. Just like, if you think how many brands there are in the world, Acorn, I didn't know. So again, the story behind that, there's something called Virgin Activity Days, which was the brand that does the public brand, but behind it, it was powered by Acorn. So I didn't even know the Acorn, or I just said we need to speak to the company who delivers that for that brand. And then 10 minutes later, meeting that person. And I think you wouldn't believe it. If you saw it in a film, you're like, no, the writers of this film, they really need to do something because this is unbelievable. And so I know there are, I'm going to say so many others, and whether it be in the book, again, these moments. Look, it also prompts me. I applied for a load of jobs in New York in 2001, and I got rejected from all of them. And I remember at the time being really disappointed. And in it, there were jobs in the Twin Towers, there was jobs within the Square Mile. And I just remember I was, 17 years old, applying. This is my dream to go to the Big Apple. And there was just something about it. And I then found out about work placement opportunity in San Francisco. And at the time I had no frame of reference for San Francisco or Silicon Valley. Like it was just not on my radar really. And I remember then accepting that job and flying out to San Francisco in August 2001 and waking up on September the 11th thinking, and what happened? And at that moment of I applied for jobs there. Like I have got the applications, I've got the addresses, I've got like this was not again in the moment I was very frustrated about it. But then, as again the one door opens, one door closes, another one opens. And I look back and it's interesting related to the book launch for the Collision Code is I share that story right at the beginning of the book. And a friend of mine in San Francisco was reading the book and said, oh, you should come to San Francisco and do the book launch. And it wasn't even on my radar to do it. And then I contacted a friend to say anything about coming to San Francisco. He's like, actually, I'm going to be in Tokyo that week. Do you want to stay in my apartment? And I'm like, okay. And then I contacted Entrepreneur First, I contacted my network out there to say, look, does anyone want to host the book launch? And Entrepreneur First said, we've got our offices in downtown San Francisco, and we'll set it up if you want to host it there. That'd be great. Alice, who's amazing. Do you know Entrepreneur First as well? Have you heard of
No,
them?
no.
So Entrepreneur First, they literally bring people, they don't even have an idea. It's just people. They bring talented people together and then they create businesses. And the value of the businesses they've created since they started is over $15 billion. So
Wow.
when people say, I don't have an idea, like literally, it's about finding and harnessing the right people and connecting them together. Anyway, coming back to San Francisco, and this just came together. I'd had the London launch already. There was no plan to do the US tour. I contacted those people from my background. I was literally staying. My friend that was in Tokyo, his apartment was on Folsom. The offices for Entrepreneur First was on Folsom. I then needed something printed. There was a print shop opposite. They literally printed it. Like I walked in, they're like, yeah, we can do that instantly, done. And it was just, again, synchronicity. These things. Again, we raised over $1,000 for charity during the trip and in San Francisco specifically. And then I went to New York. And it's just, it was so in flow. There was just this moment of you're just doing the things and showing up and being intentional about it. And, it's an absolute highlight. I'm just so grateful for all of those people that kind of showed up. And I had my roommate from 2001 was there, people I worked with were there, and a whole load of new people. And it's interesting around unintended consequences, which includes this call and this podcast, because I reached out to invite you to attend an event in the US. You weren't able to make it. And but you said, hey, look, why do we do something? Let's have a conversation about this. So
Yeah.
again, coming back down to trusting,
Yeah.
that's I'm really grateful. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you for reaching out. And, I hundreds of times a day, I'm asking God what to do, with decisions to make. And I try to walk in both worlds simultaneously. And so when I got your message, I get a lot of messages on LinkedIn, and yours, I was guided to respond and invite you on my podcast. So I'm so glad we
Oh
we
yeah.
are having this conversation. Yeah. So, and I'm curious, do you have a fear of death? Because you seem to be full of life and enthusiasm and desire to share and be of service and so forth. And I forget where I heard it, but it's like impossible to be depressed if you're focused on the needs of others.
Yeah, I think there's a contribution and there's also gratitude. I think there's also the brain can't be depressed at the same time as being grateful, which is
Mm.
why gratitude journaling is just so powerful because as soon as you flip and switch that. Um, wow, powerful big question. Am I afraid of death? I think the quote that comes to mind is everyone dies, not everyone lives. And I feel like, again, silver lining, I spend kind of around half the year in the French Alps, which is just a dream. And I know I spoke to my doctors and I was like, I'd love to do this. And can I? And again, they supported me. The initial conversation was, you're going to wait 1 to 2 years for a transplant. And then on average, you're going to live 11 years with the transplant. And let's say you've got around 14 years. Sure, do it. Like, why not? Like, go for it. And I'm just so grateful for that and the silver lining again, the client, the work that I'm doing. Am I afraid of death? I think I've been confronted with mortality at a much younger age than many people experience this, which I'm going to say is like it's a gift because it forces me. The forcing function is, do I get nervous every time I go to the doctors? It's I call it like the twilight zone, almost like a week before I've got the appointment, and things are just feeling more heightened. What happens if they tell me now's the time? And so, am I afraid of it? I think I've been so, because of the process of the heart transplant, they kind of share with you, interestingly, and I'm sure there's a reason why, before you're told if you need a heart transplant or not, they talk you through the process fully. So if you go on the list, you need to be within 4 hours of the hospital. Once we get the phone call, you are blue lighted to the hospital. You will receive the heart within 4 hours of basically finding out about it. And there are certain things you can't do. And one of the things is you can't have Mr. Whippy ice cream anymore, which makes me very concerned that if someone with a heart transplant can have Mr. Whippy, why are they still serving it to people in general? Um, and there's these nuances, but they took me through that process. So they kind of take you to the lowest point. I say lowest point, it's the drugs, the medication that you're going to be on for life, the potential rejection of the heart, and very confronting. And then they tell me, oh, you don't need one now, come back in 6 months. And so it's this really like interesting dynamic, and I'm assuming they do it so that they're getting you mentally prepared for when they tell you now's the time. You've heard that multiple times and you've got used to understanding, I guess, the process, what it really means. And I think, even with the defibrillator, when they told me I needed it, originally I didn't want it. And then I spoke to someone that had a defibrillator put in and it saved his life 3 times. And I was like, okay, I'm ready now. Um, Sign me up, give it to me and put it in. Um, so am I afraid of death? I think because I've had to talk about it and been confronted with it more, I think it's given me a gift that has enabled me to live much more intentionally than ever, and give me more perspective. And this drive is interesting when you shift from worrying about yourself to actually contributing and helping other people. That I know fills me up. And I think that's my biggest thing is like wanting to make sure that I'm having the biggest difference, that I'm contributing the most while I'm here. And as long as I'm doing that, then that keeps me on the right side of, you know, yeah, life and what I'm doing.
So, what sort of kind of nonprofits, charities are you aligned with these days? You said in Story About Grace, the Save Nine Lives
Yep.
charity. Are there charitable organizations that you're working with, or maybe you're even thinking about founding one? Like, what are you up to in those regards?
Yeah, it's interesting. Again, for those watching, there's a great charity in itself called Founders Pledge that it brings charitable giving at the forefront of kind of business giving. So if you founded a company and you want to think more intentionally about contributing, they're a charity themselves, so they're funded not by the funds that you give, but other people kind of donate to enable that to happen. And I think I want to say there's billions of pounds that have been pledged, which is really interesting. And that was kind of from kind of my business hat on. And so the foundational organisations that I've started to contribute to were the British Heart Foundation and Cardiomyopathy UK, which is my specific condition. But then the key things, I guess, that I'm so passionate about, really care about. One of them is the King's Trust, which used to be called the Prince's Trust in the UK, founded by King Charles when he was Prince of Wales. And what was amazing was they gave Student Beans then and the company £3,000 loan when we started 20 years ago. And that was the only funding the business got. So from nothing, the business has been built to over 200 people. And the foundations of it was interesting. It's not just about the money, but they gave a mentor, they gave support. I had to pitch to three, I guess the equivalent of Dragon's Den or Shark Tank. I had to pitch. And it's like three, I guess, when I was 22, older people's perception, beliefs, whether or not I was going to succeed or not. And the Prince's Trust premise is they should give money to young people if they will be better off with the money. They're not making a judgment if the business is going to work or not. They're making a judgment if we give this young person that money, will they be able to learn something? Will be able to grow? Will it enable them to get to their next stage in life, whatever that may be? And if the business fails, they don't want to be in a worse position if you give them the money, which in some scenarios, if you just give someone a few £1,000s, it could create their world, it could make a challenge for them that perhaps they weren't prepared for. So going back, so that's one that I'm supporting. The other one is ISEC, which I mentioned, the international student-run organization that I was involved in. And I went on placements to Colombia and to the Philippines. And I've actually set up, it's not an independent fund, but it sits within ISEC UK. And again, related, unfortunately, a friend of mine passed away in a car accident called Andrea Elliott. And I say we, I with a couple of other alumni set up the Elliott International Opportunity Fund. And the idea is if young people get to go and live and work again in another place, they're going to get value, they're going to grow, and leaders, I don't want to swear, but using the term leadership, which instead of leadership, because unfortunately, as we know, I think there could be a big improvement in leaders in the world. And I believe ISEC is one of those organizations that help young people grow and develop leadership skills and compassion and values-based leadership that I think is missing for many, many people in the world. So there's that. And Young Enterprise, which is a program in the UK that helps young people set up a business. So again, when I was 17, that was my first experience of setting up a business. And it was a directory service, and we signed up over 200 businesses to that. So that was again, one of the stories in the book about being young and having the experience to be able to knock on doors and speak to people. And I just remember there was one shop I went into. She's like, "Get out, whatever you're selling, get out of my shop." And I remember thinking, what do all businesses want to do? They want to make money. I was there selling for £10, this listing on a website. The money was profits were going to go to charity anyway. So I slowly explained. I said, listen, we're just from the local school and this is what we're doing. And eventually, after 10 minutes or so, we left with £10 from her and a listing on the website. And I just think, again, kind of a simple message. What's the worst thing that can happen and what's the best thing that can happen? Because often we tell ourselves the worst thing. And in that moment, she screamed at me. That's the worst thing that can happen. But the best thing is that experience was so foundational and being able to practice and gain the confidence to get that experience enabled me to then to go on to the next thing and now build a business, that employs over 200 people. And I think without those foundations and the tagline for Young Enterprise is learning by doing.
Mm.
And I just think it's just so important that young people, again, putting away technology, being out, having those experiences, being able to practice and do something. So I'm kind of very keen in things that get people out and again, community and education and enterprise. And you can see there's a kind of a theme to that. So that's what the profits from the royalties from the book are then being split between a number of all of those organizations that I've just mentioned. And I'm just so excited about kind of being able to support them more and seeing the impact of all of those different initiatives.
Yeah, so you have to get out of your comfort zone. All growth happens outside of your comfort zone. If you have a dream, then make it bigger and actually start taking some action and try and get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Have you heard of that phrase? Just one thing, you've got is it post-traumatic stress? So you've got the PTSD, but then the other phrase, which maybe tell me if you've heard of it, but post-traumatic growth. And I
Yes,
just
I have
love
heard of
that
that. Yeah, yeah, that's
because
cool.
it just, I think, when things happen and I think about my heart condition, I think about the failure of my second business when that had to shut down and the experience and the growth that I got from that, I believe makes me a much better coach because I've got a real understanding of a success, but also of a failure
Yeah.
and how to navigate that and how to decide when to close something down when you're so close to it, which again is a big challenge for many entrepreneurs that are struggling and fighting and pushing for something. And even though it's a great idea and there are so many things that make sense, if it's not working, that's also kind of a big challenge. So yeah, if you can take one thing, it's the post-traumatic growth. Like what did you learn from this? And how can that help you? And trust that that's meant to be part of your journey.
Yeah. And maybe even take it a step further and maybe you actually made the decision before you came down here to have that
Yeah,
challenge, to have that
absolutely.
that growth opportunity, right? So what
Yeah.
if you, in your life path, as you were deciding with God, your angels, your guides, whatever, before you incarnated, okay, I'm going to have a heart condition. I'm going to have to close down my business. I'm going to need to do work that pretty easy on my heart. I'm going to write a book. I'm going to like all these things, the major um, things that you decided before incarnating to do are all coming to pass, but you forgot that you had agreed to them. What if that's true?
That's quite a wild concept. And again, it's coming back down to this trust of like, I know I'm just so grateful the balance that I've got in my life today compared to when I was running a startup is and being able to share and invest and contribute and help yeah, young people and doing what I'm doing. I'm just yeah, I've got to trust that that's what's meant that's what I meant to be doing, and that's
Yeah.
why I'm here.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're contributing to a lot of people through the book and through all the things that you do. It's a ripple effect that we don't really fully grasp the full extent of until after we pass, until we're shown in our life review. And, like you said, all these serendipities, synchronicities, it's just lining things up for you if you're willing to just take a little action, and be a participant in this game. I remember one time, like I'm an introvert and I really have trouble at networking events where nobody knows who I am. I mean, I'm less so these days, but it's still not easy going up to people who I don't know. If I'm a
Hmm.
speaker, then people come up to me, but if I'm not a speaker, they don't know who I am. So I don't
Yeah.
want to like seem like I'm trying to sell them on something, but this is decades ago at an event, and I hadn't had my spiritual awakening at that point, so I was still agnostic. I didn't really believe much. But I met two guys who worked at the same company, and I couldn't believe it because the odds of it were like probably one in trillions.
Yeah.
I got them to give me their business cards, each of them, because it was so
Yeah.
outrageous. One's name was Stephan, and the
Uh-huh.
other's name was Spencer
Okay. Wow.
from the same
Amazing.
company.
Wild. It's just, again, you can't make it up. You're like,
No,
what? How did this happen?
I know. It's fun. But
Yeah.
remember, it's a game that's rigged in your favor, so you might as well play full out. I mean, love him or hate him, Elon Musk is playing full out
Yeah. Yeah.
because he sincerely, fully believes this is a video game, this is a simulation, so why not? Like, what's
I
the,
love the analogy.
yeah,
Sorry, go on.
no,
You were
like
gonna say.
what's the
The,
downside,
the,
right?
the analogy of the game is when you're playing tennis and you're playing the game and things slow down. When you're watching it in the stands, it's going so fast, back and forth, and you can't, like, how could they even hit it? But when you then get on the court and you're playing, and I just love that analogy of thinking, yeah, if this is a game, then when you participate and you're active in it, and again, that comes back down to living with intention. Um, that I've not mentioned actually, I published a video series called Heart Matters Living with Intention. And it really just documents the journey of my heart health, partly for anyone that's got a heart condition or kind of going through a similar journey, making these decisions about treatment, about the defibrillator, about even pills. I went from not taking any medication to having to take 4 different medications every day and adjusting to that. And very simple things. Having a pill box, which just so once a week, and I know you can get them for a month, but a month feels a bit overwhelming. But just once a week, then to sit, pop out all the pills, put them in my daily thing. And it just changed my relationship to instead of every day having to pop 4 different pills from 4 different packets. And it might sound like a really simple thing, but for me, that really made such a big difference to kind of adjust to living that new life. So I put together the Heart Health series. It's about 40 videos now. It's again, jameseder.com is where everything is, but has a link there. And it's why living with intention. Again, I said it earlier, often we just days turn months turn into years and we just don't live with intention. We just find ourselves where we find. And actually, when we start realizing again, if it is a game and that freedom that it gives us and the permission, I'm going to say to be like, okay, let's challenge ourselves and put ourselves out and like see what happens. And I'm never, and I talk about this in the book as well. There's moments where I'm like, oh, I'm tired. I don't really want to talk to anyone anymore, and I'm just gonna stay at home tonight. And there was one bit in the book actually, it was in Mykonos where I was I was like, oh, I'm at the end of this 3 week travel. And I thought, you know what, I'll just go out. And I went into this bar there was a lady standing there, Amelia, wearing a dress with hearts all over it. And so obviously I was drawn to this and she just looked fabulous and she's radiating energy. And I shared with her. We just started talking and I was like, I love your dress. And again, context of conversation, which is why wearing anything like a badge or a football shirt, all these things create context to start conversation. So it's about looking for them. It's two things. One is about looking for them, but one is also about presenting yourself in that way to enable people to be more approachable to them. I always say, person A sitting there looking down in their own head on their devices, wearing neutral clothing versus person B looking up, smiling, football shirt. Obviously, they're going to a game or something and enabling to create those conversations. Anyway, back to Mykonos. I started talking to her, and it turned out that she had breast cancer and that she had, was recovering and going through this process, and just the vulnerability of sharing in this moment. We ended up having just a really special evening and moment and connection. And it was like half an hour earlier, me just thinking, I just don't want to go out and I'm just going to be by myself and do my own thing. And so I guess it's even more so, again, you need to balance and take rest. But in those moments where you doubt, where you're like, oh, should I say something? That's the time when you're like, yes, because that opens things up. And yeah, that's important.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, you're an inspiration. Thank you, James. Again, your website is jameseder.com and also the collisioncode.com. Of course, your book's available on all the places, Amazon, etc. And we'll include in the show notes the link to the series, the video series for people with interested in the heart journey. And yeah, if there's anything else that you want to share in the show notes too, just send that over and I'll get that included. So thank you so much for your vulnerability, your inspiring stories, and just your positivity or outlook on life.
Thank you so much. It's been great. And feel free to reach out if I can help you or obviously your listeners and viewers with anything. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you.
Yes, and if our listener or viewer wants to hire you for coaching.
Absolutely. Feel free to reach out.
All right. Thank you so much. We'll catch you on the next episode. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer, signing off. If you want to hear more conversations like this on connection, purpose, and showing up fully, then I recommend episode 457 with Dr. James Doty, episode 535 with Dr. John DeMartini, and episode 546 with Ava Carmichael. Also, I invite you to check out the show notes, transcript, action-based checklist, and all the URLs mentioned in this interview with James Eder at getyourselfoptimized.com/552. If you enjoyed the conversation, I encourage you to share this episode and, more importantly, the entire show, Get Yourself Optimized, with a friend. Change your life and help me spread the light. Thank you.